Life, the Universe, and Everything. Chapter 4.
Important Facts from the Galactic History, Number 2. Reproduced from the Sidworld Daily Mentioner's Book of Popular Galactic History. Since this galaxy began, vast civilization has risen and fallen, risen and fallen, risen and fallen, risen and fallen, risen and fallen so often that it's quite tempting to think that life in the galaxy must be
A. Something akin to seasick, space sick, time sick, history sick, or some such thing. And B. Stupid.
Chapter 5. It seemed to Arthur as if the whole sky suddenly just stood aside and let him through. It seemed to him that the atoms of his brain and the atoms of the cosmos were streaming through each other. It seemed to him that he was blown on the wind of the universe and that the wind was him. It seemed to him that he was one of the thoughts of the universe and that the universe was a thought of his. It seemed to the people at Lord's Cricket Ground that another North London restaurant had just come and gone, as they so often do, and that this was somebody else's problem. "What happened?" whispered Arthur in considerable awe. "We took off," said Slidey Buttfast. Arthur lay in startled stillness on the acceleration couch. He wasn't certain whether he had just got space sickness or religion. "Nice mover," said Ford in an unsuccessful attempt to disguise the degree to which he had been impressed by what Slidey Buttfast's ship had just done. "Shame about the director." For a moment or two, the old man didn't reply. He was staring at the instruments with the air of one who is trying to convert Fahrenheit to centigrade in his head whilst his house is burning down. Then his brow cleared and he stared for a moment at the wide panoramic screen in front of him, which displayed a bewildering complexity of stars streaming like silver threads around them. His lips moved as if he was trying to spell something. Suddenly his eyes darted in alarm back to his instruments, but then his expression merely subsided into a steady frown. He looked back up at the screen, felt his own pulse. His frown deepened for a moment, then he relaxed. "It's a mistake to try and understand mathematics," he said. "They only worry me." "What did you say?" "Decor," said Ford. "Pity about it." "Deep in the fundamental heart of mind and universe," said Slidey Buttfast. "There is a reason." Ford glanced sharply around. He clearly thought this was taking an optimistic view of things. The interior of the flight deck was dark green, dark red, dark brown, cramped, and moodily lit. Inexplicably, the resemblance to a small Italian bistro had failed to end at the hatchway. Small pools of light picked out pot plants, glazed tiles, and all sorts of unidentifiable brass things. Raffia-wrapped bottles lurked hideously in the shadows. The instruments in which had occupied Slidey Buttfast's attention seemed to be mounted in the bottom of bottles which were set in concrete. Ford reached out and touched it. Fake concrete, plastic. Fake bottles set in fake concrete. The fundamental heart of mind and universe can take a running jump, he thought to himself. This is rubbish. On the other hand, it could not be denied that the way the ship had moved made the heart of gold seem like an electric pram. He swung himself off the couch. He brushed himself down. He looked at Arthur, who was singing quietly to himself. He looked at the screen and recognized nothing. He looked at Slidey Buttfast. "How far did we just travel?" he said. "About," said Slidey Buttfast. "About 2/3 of the way across the galactic disk, I would say, roughly. Yes, roughly 2/3, I think." "It's a strange thing," said Arthur quietly, "that the further and faster one travels across the universe, the more one's position in it seems to be largely immaterial, and one is filled with a profound, or rather emptied of a..." "Yes, very strange," said Ford. "Where are we going?" "Where are we going?" said Slidey Buttfast. "To confront an ancient nightmare of the universe." "And where are you going to drop us off?" "I will need your help." "Tough. Look, there's somewhere you can take us where we can have fun. I'm trying to think of it. We can get drunk and maybe listen to some extremely evil music." "Hold on, I'll look it up." He dug out his copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and tipped through those parts of the index primarily concerned with sex and drugs and rock and roll. A curse has arisen from the midst of time, said Slidey Bartfast. Yes, I expect so, said Ford. Hey, he said, lighting accidentally on one particular reference entry. Eccentrica Gallumbits. Did you ever meet her? The triple-breasted whore of Eroticon 6. Some people say her androgynous zone starts some 4 miles away from her actual body. Me, I disagree. I say 5. A curse, said Slidey Bartfast, which will engulf the galaxy in fire and destruction, and possibly bring the universe to a premature doom. I mean it, he added. Sounds like a bad time, said Ford. With a look I'll be drunk enough not to notice. Here, he said, stabbing his finger at the screen of the guide. Would be a really wicked place to go, and I think we should. What do you say, Arthur? Stop mumbling mantras and pay attention. There's important stuff you're missing here. Arthur pushed himself up from his couch and shook his head. Where are we going? He said. To confront an ancient knight. Can it? Said Ford. Arthur, we're going out into the galaxy to have some fun. Is that an idea you can cope with? What's Slidey Bartfast looking so anxious about? Said Arthur. Nothing, said Ford. Doom, said Slidey Bartfast. Come, he added with a sudden authority. There is much I must show and tell you. He walked towards a green, wrought iron spiral staircase set incomprehensibly in the middle of the flight deck, and started to ascend. Arthur, with a frown, followed. Ford slung the guide sullenly back into his satchel. My doctor said I had a malformed public duty gland and a natural deficiency in moral fiber, he muttered to himself, and that I am therefore excused from saving universes. Nevertheless, he stomped up the stairs behind them. What they found upstairs was just stupid, or so it seemed, and Ford shook his head, buried his face in his hands and slumped against the pot plant, crushing it against the wall. The central computational area, said Slidey Bartfast unperturbed. This is where every calculation affecting the ship in any way is performed. Yes, I know what it looks like, but it is in fact a complex, 4-dimensional topographical map of a series of highly complex mathematical functions. It looks like a joke, said Arthur. I know what it looks like, said Slidey Bartfast, and went into it. As he did so, Arthur had a sudden vague flash of what it might mean, but he refused to believe it. The universe could not possibly work like that, he thought. Cannot possibly. That, he thought to himself, would be as absurd as... He terminated that line of thinking. Most of the really absurd things he could think of had already happened, and this was one of them. It was a large glass cage, or box. In fact, a room. In it was a table, a long one. Around it were gathered about a dozen chairs of bent wood style. On it was a tablecloth, a grubby, red and white check tablecloth, scarred with the occasional cigarette burn, each presumably at a precise calculated mathematical position, and on the table sat some half-eaten Italian meals, hedged about with half-eaten breadsticks and half-drunk glasses of wine, and toyed with listlessly by robots. It was all completely artificial. The robot customers were attended by a robot waiter, a robot wine waiter, and a robot maitre d'. The furniture was artificial, the tablecloth artificial, and each particular piece of food was clearly capable of exhibiting all the mechanical characteristics of, say, a Pablo Espresso, without actually being one. And all participated in a little dance together, a complex routine involving the manipulation of menus, bill pads, wallets, checkbooks, credit cards, watches, pencils, and paper napkins, which seemed to be hovering constantly on the edge of violence, but never actually getting anywhere. Slidey Bartfast hurried in, and then appeared to pass the time of day quite idly with the maitre d', whilst one of the customer robots, an Autorory, slid slowly under the table, mentioning what he intended to do to some guy over some girl. Slidey Bartfast took over the seat which had been thus vacated and passed a shrewd eye over the menu. The tempo of the routine round the table seemed somehow imperceptibly to quicken. Arguments broke out. people attempted to prove things on napkins. They waved furiously at each other and attempted to examine each other's pieces of chicken. The waiter's hand began to move on the bill pad more quickly than a human hand could manage, and then more quickly than a human eye could follow. The pace accelerated. Soon, an extraordinary and instant politeness overwhelmed the group, and seconds later it seemed that a moment of consensus was suddenly achieved. A new vibration thrilled through the ship. Slutty Bartfast emerged from the glass room. Bistromathics, he said, the most powerful computational force known to parascience. Come to the room of informational illusions. He swept past and carried them bewildered in his wake.
Chapter 6. The Bistromatic Drive is a wonderful new method of crossing vast interstellar distances without all that dangerous mucking about with improbability factors. Bistromathics itself is simply a revolutionary new way of understanding the behavior of numbers. Just as Einstein observed that time was not an absolute but depended on the observer's movement in space, and that space was not an absolute but depended on the observer's movement in time, so it is now realized that numbers are not absolute but depend on the observer's movement in restaurants. The first non-absolute number is the number of people for whom the table is reserved. This will vary during the course of the first 3 telephone calls to the restaurant, and then bear no apparent relation to the number of people who actually turn up, or to the number of people who subsequently join them after the show, match, party, gig, or to the number of people who leave when they see who else has turned up. The second non-absolute number is the given time of arrival, which is now known to be one of those most bizarre of mathematical concepts. A reciprocal exclusion, a number of whose existence can only be defined as being anything other than itself. In other words, the given time of arrival is the one moment of time at which it is impossible that any member of the party will arrive. Reciprocal exclusions now play a vital part in many branches of maths, including statistics and accountancy, and also form the basic equations used to engineer the somebody else's problem field. The third and most mysterious piece of non-absoluteness of all lies in the relationship between the number of items on the bill, the cost of each item, the number of people at the table, and what they are each prepared to pay for. The number of people who have actually brought any money is only a sub-phenomenon in this field. The baffling discrepancies which used to occur at this point remained uninvestigated for centuries, simply because no one took them seriously. They were at the time put down to such things as politeness, rudeness, meanness, flashness, tiredness, emotionality, or the lateness of the hour, and completely forgotten about on the following morning. They were never tested under laboratory conditions, of course, because they never occurred in laboratories. Not in reputable laboratories, at least. And so, it was only with the advent of pocket computers that the startling truth became finally apparent. And it was this: numbers written on restaurant bills within the confines of restaurants do not follow the same mathematical laws as numbers written on any other pieces of paper in any other parts of the universe. This single fact took the scientific world by storm. It completely revolutionized it. So many mathematical conferences got held in such good restaurants that many of the finest minds of a generation died of obesity and heart failure, and the science of math was put back by years. Slowly, however, the implications of the idea began to be understood. To begin with, it had been too stark, too crazy, too much what the man in the street would have said, "Oh yes, I could have told you that," about. Then some phrases like interactive subjectivity frameworks were invented, and everybody was able to relax and get on with it. The small group of monks who had taken up hanging around the major research institutes singing strange chants to the effect that the universe was only a figment of its own imagination were eventually given a street theater grant and went away.
I hope you're enjoying life, the universe, and everything. The next chapter will be coming out soon. In the meantime, please like, share, and subscribe if you like the content. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.